Unfortunately, I feel like I made a mistake. I should have taken my laptop outside this afternoon and done it from the deck, but unfortunately, like most of us, were in the office. Doing our presentation today are Zack Gates and Kyle Woiwood, both CPAs with LWBJ, which is one of the Midwest's leading CPA and business advisory firms. Zack has served as the practice leader of the accounting and advisory business unit since 2019. Prior to this, he served clients in the audit and assurance practice for more than 6 years. He has significant experience in the manufacturing, real estate, and construction and nonprofit organizations, technology, and business benefit plan industries. He received his bachelor's in finance from Iowa State University and his bachelor's in accounting from Upper Iowa University. Kyle joined LWBJ in 2015 and specializes in tax compliance and consulting. He provides expertise in a variety of business structures, including partnerships, S Corps, C Corps, employee benefit plans, and nonprofits. He has extensive experience working with startup and small businesses in a variety of industries, including technology, biosciences, rental, and service providers. And he also has extensive experience working with international tax clients on complex foreign compliance and consulting. Kyle didn't say, he received his bachelor's in accounting from the University of Northern Iowa. So it's all yours, guys.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kurt. Let me see if I can share my screen real quick. All right. Can everybody see PowerPoint, hopefully? Perfect. Well, just what everyone wants to talk about today, accounting and COVID. I'm sure we haven't had enough of that recently. But what we're really going to be discussing are areas that you can consider updating in your accounting systems and processes in order to work more efficiently and effectively in this new COVID world. I also want to note that, while we may refer to specific services and software in this presentation, we're not necessarily endorsing any of them. We're just using them as examples of things to consider. And before you do move to any other system, you want to make sure you do your due diligence across the board, make sure that's going to work for you and for your company. Like Kurt mentioned, my name is Kyle Woiwood, CPA here at LWBJ, Senior Tax Manager. Been with the firm 5.5 years now, was at one of the big four firms for about 4.5 years prior to this.
I'm Zack Gates, Director of our Accounting and Advisory Services Business Unit. I've been with the firm 8 years now.
And just quickly on LWBJ, in case you don't know who we are a full service CPA firm. So tax services, audit services, accounting and advisory services, and we also have a consulting division that does anything from M&A transactions, valuation, litigation support, due diligence, buy, sell, basically a little bit of everything. So that's who we are and who we work with. This is what we're going to be covering today. First off, just essentially a recap of the disruption that COVID caused specifically to many companies' accounting practice across the board. Zack's then going to go into a real life case study of something that happened to one of our clients and kind of what they went through and what they had to put it in place to succeed in COVID. Some differences between manual versus digital processes in your accounting systems, in-house versus outsourced accounting, on-premise versus cloud technology, different process and procedures items to consider, and then finally, what tools and different technologies are out there to help facilitate you through these. So I want to take you on a trip down memory lane back to a much simpler time at the beginning of this year, where things like going into the office, having face-to-face meetings with coworkers, meeting with your clients, being really excited about March Madness, and boy, it was going to be a great year. We were going to, it was going to be something. And then the pandemic hit. And what do we do now? All of a sudden, nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows, Can you go into the office? How are you supposed to now communicate with your employees? If you're not in the office, how are you supposed to talk to them? How are you supposed to talk to your advisors that maybe you would meet with on a regular basis? How are you going to get your information to and from those advisors to make sure you're able to kind of continue your business from that standpoint? How are you going to bill your customers? If you're not in the office, who's generating the invoice? How are you getting the invoice to and from the customers? How are you able to go out and generate new revenue, meet new clients, generate new business? How are you going to pay bills? All these questions really did factor into quite a bit of uncertainty for businesses across the board, from brand new startups to legacy multi-million-dollar companies. There was a lot of uncertainty in the market. And just something as simple as a virus changed all the different ways that we needed to work from an accounting perspective. And I think companies quickly figured out how much they relied upon in-person services and processes, and that performing those going forward, there's going to be much more difficult than it was previously with this new COVID world that we were living in. Answering like who's going to go back into the office to get bank statements that came in the mail, or bills that came into the office. If you had to pay your employees, and let's say you had been paying them paper checks historically, how were you then able to do that? Were you able to still do that? If you needed to go deposit a check at a bank, was the bank even open? If you didn't have mobile banking, what were your options to get that deposited? More specifically to your accounting applications. If you had an on-premise accounting software where you needed to be in the office in order to access it, in order to work with it, were you able to get into the office? Or if you had a strategic employee that was responsible for this, were they? Payroll was another big one, that if you had manual timesheets, people filling out paper timesheets and providing them to somebody to get them paid, how did that work going forward? And then again, it's just if that employee needed to be there for whatever reason, were you able to get them paid? And so, the moral of this story is COVID really did throw a wrench into about every aspect of the accounting process. And like I mentioned before, Zack actually has an example of what one of our clients had to go through in regards to addressing some of these issues.
Thanks, Kyle. So I just want to share a case study. I always like real life examples. In this case, it really, the purpose is to really show you how powerful cloud technology is, and really how making drastic changes to your business can be done fairly quickly. And I don't want to say painless, but can be done quickly. I had a client reach out to me during COVID. They had a key accounting person leave their business. And we found out that, this business had a server in-house. All accounting functions were primarily completed in the office, printing checks, signing checks, all the transactional work, no real ability to work remote. This company had around 60 employees, so a good sized company. And they came to us and essentially said, what do we do now? And so we ended up getting them set up on a core cloud accounting system, QuickBooks Online, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And we completely revamped their accounts payable process to more of a, everything is digital now, done remotely, approvals, everything. And also set them up on a new payroll software. So they went from essentially doing everything in the office to everything in the cloud and behind the scenes. And there is a lot of coordination and effort and mapping out how things work and understanding how they're going to work in the future. But, just thinking about the before and after in this situation, it was pretty incredible that you can do that now with technology these days. So the point is, there's a lot of technology out there that can really make your lives easier. And, what better time than now to really take a look at these things for your business?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's if you were going to do this at some point, I think COVID may be the tipping point for kind of what puts you over the top to bite the bullet. The first thing that we're going to specifically talk about, just manual versus digital processes. Oftentimes when you kind of tear apart your accounting process and you start critically assessing why you're doing certain things the way you are, or the manner in which you're doing them, there can be significant room for improvement across the board in different areas. Obviously, the four noted here, that's the whole goal of this. Is the accounting function by itself is an administrative process, and so the less time that you have to spend doing this administrative work, the more time it gives you as a small business to go out and do what you're supposed to be doing, to sell your service, to meet new people, to generate revenue, to build your product, whatever it ends up being. And so the whole goal of looking to digitize some of these processes is to save you time, to make whatever you're doing more accurate. If you can have a software do it for you rather than have the risk of a manual error. Again, like we've talked about, just the efficiency of doing it, and finally the convenience of it. Are you able to do what you need to do from where you are? And if you need to be home for whatever reason, if it's for the office being shut down and your kids are home from school, and you need to be able to work from home, can you? And so, if you look across the different areas of your accounting function, if you start specifically with your accounting software, if you think about how your transactions are currently being input into that software, obviously most people start with their bank account. Most accounting softwares have the ability to automatically pull in the transactions from your bank account directly into your software. And so that's, at the most simplistic level, something that can save you a little bit of time. But if you take that one step further, most softwares are able to auto-categorize those different entries based on kind of predefined rules. And so if you always have a particular expense from a particular vendor, you can set up the software to say, every time you pull in this expense from this vendor, you can then categorize it according to this transaction. And depending on obviously the volume of transactions that you have, that can be real time savings, especially if it's consistent time and time again. Similarly, if you have a transaction that you need to enter every single month, for example, if you had, you entered your payroll manually, for example, but it was always to the same accounts in the same way, you are able to create memorized transactions where it's going to do the same thing time and time again. Or if you're doing some sort of accrual, some sort of expense accrual that you always incur an expense a particular month, you pay it the following month, you can create these memorized transactions to automatically make those entries for you. In regards to payroll, I think this is personally a big one because payroll, of the manual administrative processes, payroll is very manual and it is very regimented in terms of what are the things that you need to do in order to successfully file payroll. And so at the most basic level, you need to be able to pay your employees. And so the more employees you can get on a direct deposit, that obviously is logistically the simplest because then you don't have to worry about cutting paper checks. But there's so much more to it because every payroll, you have payroll taxes taken out. Those payroll taxes need to get deposited with the federal government or with the various states in which that you're withholding these taxes. There are many, if not all softwares have some sort of ability to do this for you. And so not only will that cut down on the amount of time that you have to go to each of their websites to manually remit the deposit, but it also is going to make it much more accurate because software really doesn't fudge numbers. It really doesn't transpose numbers. And so it's going to do all that for you. And then similarly, the quarterly filings or sometimes monthly filings associated with the IRS or the different states, these softwares can manage that for you as well. And so by onboarding a payroll software that encompasses all of these things into one, all of a sudden you've just taken a ton of administrative work right off your plate. Similarly with bill pay, there are plenty of online bill pay options where, again, you can have it set up so that your customers, your vendors send their invoices directly to this online bill pay system. And by doing so, it'll automatically generate the expense in the system. If you have it already set up, you can have the ACH information or the address to cut a check already built into the system, and you can then pay out of this system. Similarly, you can also have it set up linked back to your accounting software so that when you do pay this, it automatically updates your accounting software for it. So by doing one thing, you've created all these things that kind of work in tandem if they're able to work together. And lastly, this is a little outside the accounting scope, but there's plenty of softwares out there that integrate an outsourced HR function. And so oftentimes, smaller companies aren't able to bring on a full HR person, but you still need that guidance, that functionality, that ability to deal with HR issues. If that can then be built into your accounting software, your payroll software, it's definitely an added benefit that can take a lot of stress off a small business.
The cool part about a lot of these softwares these days, especially the accounting side, the web-based accounting platforms like QuickBooks, for example, or Xero or Sage, a lot of these play nicely with other applications. You can link in your payroll system, your bill pay system, your HR system, all so it's flowing through your accounting system, and really it can enable you to automate more and more. And the more you can automate, the better. As long as you set it up correctly, can make your life a lot easier.
I completely agree, Zach. I think the setup is an extremely underrated but extremely important component of this. Because you may be paying for all these features, but if you're only using a little bit of it, you may not be getting the full benefit of all these potential efficiencies. But a good quality setup can get you a long way.
Definitely. So as you're thinking about your current situation, one of the things you really need to think about is whether to, do your accounting in-house or whether you outsource a portion of it, outsource all of it. So I'd like to take a look at some of the pros and cons of outsourcing. Let's start with the cons. So really, one of the biggest cons of outsourcing is you don't have that person down the hall. You don't have Kyle down the hall to go say, hey, Kyle, I need you to go do this. I need you to, how much tax am I going to go owe on this transaction? Or, little mini projects here and there. You don't have that person down the hall. Another con would be, somebody is not 100% dedicated to your business. So they're not going there every day. They may not have a complete understanding, but it's going to take, an outsourced person more time to get up to speed. And also another con I would say is really, with outsourcing, you have to be more intentional with your communication and cadence and what that means. With all this being said, there are, many pros to outsourcing as well. Some of the pros to outsourcing your accounting would be, access to a variety of experts, not just one person. And when you have access to multiple people, they've seen, different scenarios, they've solved different problems. And that's their job. They do accounting for people, and that's what they do every day. So they tend to be more efficient. Another pro would be it's outsourcing is scalable. If you're a brand new startup company, you may not need, too much help up front, but as you grow, you start to need more and more. And usually an outsourcing firm can grow with you and provide more resources as needed. And even scale back as needed. Maybe you don't need as much. And the last, but maybe the most important pro of outsourcing is generally it should cost less than having, a full-time employee in-house, not having to worry about, training and overhead and turnover risk. But I would say that, COVID really created, I'm going to say, rapid disruption with technology. So it has enabled more and more companies to outsource more functions. But yeah, as you can see here, there are pros and cons to both. But this is something you really should consider when you're thinking about your business.
Well, the nice part about it too is, accounting firms, for the most part, are flexible with this. And so if you only need a component of your accounting process outsourced, it's one of those things that they'll work with you. it's certainly something that we do, but not every company is the same. Not every company has the same needs or, owners in particular. It's very different about what owners want to essentially manage themselves or what they feel comfortable having somebody else take charge of. And so it really can be on a, here's the services I need some help with. Here's the ones I don't. And in many cases, that's going to work for an outsourced accounting firm. So I'm sure in this day and age that most people have heard the term cloud before. If you haven't heard the term cloud before, it is not one of those big white puffy things. Those are clouds, yes, but we are talking about the digital cloud. And not to hopefully bore people, but at the most basic non-IT level, basically it means that you aren't storing the data associated with the activity that you're doing. That data is sitting on a server somewhere in some giant server farm, likely hosted by one of the big IT companies, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the IBMs, all those big technology companies. They're housing your data. And then you, as the end user, are using the internet to access that data or access that application. And so there can be some really intriguing benefits to using cloud technology versus having the application installed directly on your computer or directly on your server in your office. Like we've talked about quite a bit so far already, is the automation component of it. These, like for example, QuickBooks Online is a great example of this. QuickBooks knows that they do accounting financial statements really, really well. And so they built their online platform to be able to prepare financial statements pretty simply. But I think they realize that they're not the best at some of those additional features, their inventory management features, or even their payroll features, their time entry features. There's many different things that people have different needs that they didn't want to keep building out all these possible functions. So what they did was they opened up their cloud platform to allow these integrations with these other services that can do things that maybe they didn't want to do. And so it really opens up the possibilities for a more automated workflow in your accounting function. I guess that gets into my second one, the integrations. All these different pieces coming together to do what you need them to do. The part that is really nice for us accountants, selfishly, is the real-time data aspect of this. The fact that this thing is sitting out there and can be refreshed, it can be accessed from anywhere that you have internet. So if you need to pull up your financial statements, if you need to pull up your bank account, if you need to see what's going on with whatever you're trying to access, you're going to see the most current version immediately. If you compare that to, for example, a locally installed accounting software that's sitting on your computer or sitting on your server, you need to be in front of that computer or in your office on that network and to be able to access that information. And so that can be a limiting factor, especially when you throw in COVID and, should you be going into the office? Is the right person able to go into the office to get the information that they need? And that's a huge benefit, especially if you can access it on your phone. I think a lot
of these systems. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say a lot of these systems have phone applications on them now, and you're a business owner. You're extremely busy. You're running your business. You're handling day-to-day operations, and if you can get to stuff quicker on your phone and have access to it, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
And I think another component that can be kind of sneaky is the security associated with it. I mean, living in this digital world, all this is great. And as a millennial, I firmly endorse all this technology. However, it comes with a big security risk. And security isn't cheap. And paying someone to manage that network, whatever you need to keep secure, isn't cheap. And so by outsourcing it to one of these bigger companies in their cloud, they have the billions of dollars to be able to spend on security. And I've actually toured a server farm before, and it's like Fort Knox trying to get in that thing. It's unbelievable the amount of security they have, both physical and then obviously everything technological as well. And so by buying into that infrastructure, you're in essence paying for a part of that security that maybe you won't then have to manage as closely. It still comes with plenty of your own internal to risk, and you want to have an IT plan as well. But it's hard to be able to match the spending that these big companies are going through to protect that data. And the last part I'll talk about, this is it's an option for applications that maybe aren't able to be put in the cloud. Whoever make that application didn't make a cloud version of it, or it's not available yet. There are companies out there that allow you to host your locally installed applications in their cloud environment. So essentially what that means is, if normally this application has to be installed on your computer, well, instead of being installed on your computer, you're going to install it in this company's cloud environment. And now all of a sudden you can access that desktop application from a website. And so now you've turned this non-cloud item into a cloud item. And so that may be applicable for some people as well, depending on what type of application you're using. Or, the thing we hear often is, well, I've had QuickBooks Desktop for years, and I really like QuickBooks Desktop. And for XYZ reasons, I'm not ready to go to the QuickBooks Online platform. Well, this would be an example of something. There's companies out there that host QuickBooks Desktop in a cloud environment. And so that gives you access to that information more real time. That gives any of your advisors access to that more real time. And so you kind of get, in essence, the best of both worlds there.
So now taking a couple steps back and really thinking about your business's accounting process, before you get to the technology piece, I want you to think about a couple of questions here. First being, do you receive your company's financial statements, on a timely basis? When do you see the numbers each month or quarter or maybe year? Next question, can you rely on them? Are they accurate? Or do you still have, balance sheet accounts where you have no idea what's in it? Next question, do you have a budget for your business? Budgets are extremely important. It's how you can manage your expenses and understand how you're doing in accordance with what you plan to do. And last but not least, do you have a cash flow forecast? This may be one of the most important things you can have for your business. As you guys know, cash is the lifeblood of your business. And, think of this, if your profit and loss or your income statement is your speedometer, think of your cash forecast. Think of cash as fuel for your gas tank. And I would say these things, there's many different formats you can build these things in. I would say keep it simple. Some people do these daily. If you spend money like Kyle's wife or my wife, I have to look at our bank balance daily, and I need to understand what's going on. So some companies, I've seen them weekly, I've seen them quarterly, monthly, but extremely important. And keep it simple and make sure you understand what's going on. But this can really help you plan to make sure you understand where your cash is going and what cash is going to look like tomorrow or next quarter or next month. But if you're sitting there thinking, the answer to some of these questions was no, I would say now is the time to call up your accountant or your CPA and start talking about these things on what you can do to change the way things are currently working for your business, so you can answer yes to these questions. These are extremely important for you to be able to make timely decisions and run and grow your business. I would say that. Go ahead,
Another
Kyle.
perspective too. The easier you can make it on your advisors to access this information, the better they're going to be able to kind of have this be a collaborative process with you. And so if you always have to send a a backup of your accounting software to your accountant, and only one of you can be changing information or working with information at a time, that can create a small logistical headache that if that application was instead in the cloud and you're able to access both simultaneously, Google Sheets or something like that, where you both can see the same information at the same time, that's going to create some efficiencies there as well. And in theory, allow the advisor to provide better advice, more real-time advice.
So now that we've talked about kind of some general technology pieces and accounting process, I really wanted to give you examples on some technology that's out there, and really just thinking about where you should even start. This can be overwhelming when you're thinking about everything, but I wanted to start off with a quote here from Barry Melanson, President and CEO of the AICPA. So technology will never move slower than it is today. I love this quote. It's only going to get faster. Now is the time to embrace this stuff. So Kyle, if you want to flip to the next slide. So just thinking about where should you even start with this stuff? I would say the first thing you should do is think about your your core accounting system. Start there, get a good solid core accounting system as step one. And there's many out there. There's a lot of small and mid-sized businesses use QuickBooks, and QuickBooks is a great software. There's Xero, there's Sage, there's Dynamics, there's all kinds of stuff. But so do your due diligence, but start with a core software. And then I would say before you start digging into other applications or programs to help you out, I would start to think about your current accounting processes. Think about receivables, payables, payroll, financial reporting, planning. Think about those processes and what's the most painful part in those processes. Think about the biggest pain points, and then find a solution to really solve for those pain points. There's literally thousands of applications out there that can do many things for you, but I found that it's important to come with a problem first and then find a solution to meet your needs. Some of the examples that I've heard in the marketplace and even worked with a couple of them. So we mentioned, your core accounting system, we talked about QuickBooks, there's desktop and online, Xero, Sage. Thinking about receivables and payables. I've used Bill.com before for more cash flow forecasting and scenario planning. I've seen apps called QVinci, Hirav, Jirav, Hirav, cash flow tool. And also with cash flow forecasting, don't forget about, this kind of goes against what we've talked about the entire time, but a spreadsheet in Microsoft Excel, because ultimately you need to understand what the inputs are that you're going to put into this thing that's going to drive your cash projections. You need to have a full understanding of where you're spending money and what the drivers are in your business. So don't underestimate Excel.
Being a big Excel guy myself, I mean, you can automate Excel pretty well, and that's depending on your comfort level with formulas and making sure things are linked. I mean, you can make a pretty complex Excel workbook. So that's not always a bad option.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Keep it simple, understand what the key drivers are. And, sometimes accountants can want to start counting pennies, but honestly, keep it simple. Just get it close so you know what's coming. But if you're going to use one of these tools like a QVinci or Hirav or a piece of software, just make sure you clearly understand the inputs that you're putting into these softwares that are going to drive the numbers. Because the last thing you want to do is to get a new application, start filling in some things, and then bam, you have something that's completely off. Some other examples for expense management, if your business has a lot of credit cards, corporate cards, I've heard of Expensify, Concur, Tally. some examples of reporting tools and consolidations. Maybe your business has multiple legal entities. Again, QVinci, Fathom. These are just some examples. So, again, when you're going through this, start, find a core accounting software, look at your processes, think about your pain points, and then find a solution to meet those needs.
I do think it's important that, just like you said, Zach, you do your due diligence on what will actually add value to you and your company versus what won't. Because just like any subscription service, and oftentimes any cloud-based platform is some sort of monthly subscription, those can really start to add up cost-wise too. And so in theory, you don't want to bring on something just for the sake of, hey, yeah, these two accountants told me I should go out and buy all these things. No, that's kind of the wrong way to go about it, because if it's not solving a problem that you have, or if you're not using all the features that this thing has to offer for the price you're paying, you're going to incur these unnecessary costs. And so just like Zach said, sometimes more simple is better. Excel being a primary example of that. And so it looks like we got done a little bit early, so hopefully it's not too early. But here is both of our contact information for both Zach and myself. Obviously, if you guys have any questions, clarifications, things you want to know more about, we'd be happy to answer. Both our email and our phone numbers are there. So I think at this time, if there's any questions, shoot them our way.
There are a couple questions that have come in. Best advice for employees working from home. Thoughts on what we should reimburse for?
It's becoming interesting, right? The home office setup and what's necessary to be able to work efficiently from home. I can speak to kind of what we have at our firm. Almost all of us have at least 2 sets of monitors, sometimes 3. And so if that's a necessary component for what you do, I think external monitors are a great way to make sure, if you're going to use the technology, that you have the proper visual space to be able to work with it and, see 2 things at once. I think also, as best you can, treating it like an office. If you're able to have an office, or if you're able to post up at the kitchen table, whatever. But distractions are huge at home. Whether you have an animal, you have kids, you have a significant other, something. If you're able to kind of zone in like you would at the office. So honestly, what saved me? Noise canceling headphones, because otherwise I'm sitting there listening to everything instead of trying to do work. So I need to make sure my focus is on what it should be.
And I would make sure that employees working from home have high-speed internet or good enough internet to handle the day-to-day work that they're doing. The last thing you want is somebody working from home and getting kicked off the internet or having a delay or have it being slow. So you could consider, reimbursing for a better router, or there's something called like a Wi-Fi mesh system, an Orbi, that can speed up your internet. Fast internet is key.
Something we didn't maybe specifically address, but how are you communicating with your employees? And so I think this has been the onboarding of some of these communication tools like Microsoft Teams, for example, or Zoom, or Slack. Some of these options for you to communicate with your employees, even though you're not in the office anymore, you're maybe not as conveniently put by a phone. That's more of obviously a business decision about what technology you onboard there, but that offers a lot of abilities to not only communicate, to do screen sharing, to have external meetings, internal meetings, to share things across a team rather than to your entire company. A lot of different flexibility options there as well.
We have another question. Do you have any advice on best practices for managing receipt of incoming checks with an almost fully remote workforce? As a nonprofit, we outsource. We outsource most accounting functions, but still directly receive checks in the mail and transmit for deposit. They've made temporary policy adjustments due to COVID. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Deposits, I would say do everything you can to have people pay online or through ACH or wire. Think about setting up a bank lockbox where you have a bank collect your hard checks and deposit them in your account and give you a receipt. But yeah, that can be tough. That can be tough.
And there are softwares out there. I think to our example, we use a software that essentially is built into our website, and then it also on the back end integrates with our accounting software internally. Obviously, comes with a monthly fee in order to have that. But basically, if you're receiving enough maybe checks or things that are kind of causing you this administrative headache, that you need to switch to something that's going to be a majority digitally, there's options out there that you can build those things into, whether it be you put it on your invoice and then it directs them to a link, or if you build it right into your website where you direct them to your website to click on the link to take them to that payment. It just honestly, it kind of depends on the volume, in my opinion, of how many of these in-person checks are you receiving, and is that worth the corresponding fee in order to have that functionality?
We've had another question. Do you have any advice on tax credits related to COVID? That's been obviously a critical function associated with this past couple of months with the PPP program, but also then all the payroll credits associated for all the different type of COVID reimbursements that companies can get.
If it's a payroll credit and you have your payroll's processed through a third-party provider or a software, talk to them. A lot of times they'll have guidance on where to get information, how to enter, certain hours if somebody is sick because of COVID or sick because they're watching their kid at home, or their kids can't go to school because of COVID. Talk to your payroll provider. They a lot of times they'll have guidance. If you're doing it yourself, honestly, try to call your tax CPA, your CPA, or if it's more on the HR side, on if somebody, whether they qualify for COVID sick pay or expanded family leave, talk to your attorney, but don't be afraid to ask questions, because you need to make sure you're getting the benefits and get these things right.
Well, that's essentially where I was going to go with it. Is there's a lot of potential, different types of credits, different nuances to each of them, and my opinion is a payroll provider can really earn their money when you have a specific scenario. You go to them, they either have that option already built into their software, or they're able to direct you on how do you apply for that credit? How do you get reimbursed for this? Are they able to handle that for you? And I do think a lot of payroll companies were kind of thrown to the fire with this COVID outbreak, because they had to completely upend their software and build in inputs now for these things that essentially were created out of thin air by the legislature in order to help situations like this. So it showed the companies that had that kind of foresight to build that into their technology versus maybe some of the ones that were slower to adapt because they were using maybe an older platform or something that wasn't as easily updatable for this complete change that COVID threw at us.